Hello and welcome to another episode of ELA Adventures, a tech-savvy talk with me, your host, Juliana Robinson. Today, I am having one of my dear friends and colleague, Meredith Fivash, join us. Meredith, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Meredith Fivash. I teach 8th grade ELA in Coppell, Texas.
Yes, and how long have you been teaching ELA?
I'm just completing my 4th year, and I've taught in Coppell the whole time.
Sweet. And Meredith and we work right next to each other. She's in the classroom right next to mine. We both teach 8th graders and we collaborate every day as a part of our PLC. So she is a frequent thought partner with me. So let's just jump right in here. Meredith, what would you say is the most creative project you've ever given your ELA students, and how did they respond to that?
I would say this year was the blackout poetry, just because a lot of them are, not very familiar with writing poetry. So this helped them not only be visually stimulated with creativity, but also being able to write poems and surprising themselves with how well they did.
Yes, I love that unit also. And I've had kids, it's a good one when they're asking you to do it even in their free time. They're like, hey, do you have any more of those pages so I can make blackout poems? So,
oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
They really love that. I would say that the most creative project we did this year, from my perspective, was actually your idea. It was to use their argumentative writing strategies to engage in debates.
Oh, that was really fun.
That was really fun. The kids loved it, and they are still asking.
I know we had to make new ones because they wanted to do another debate.
Yes. So, and they had to research. What else were you telling me they had to do? They had to research. They had to have their rebuttals.
Well, yeah, and they had to check their sources online to make sure they were relevant.
Yeah, that was a really good activity. In the past, when I've taught argumentative essay writing, it kind of felt pretty flat, and it didn't feel new or fresh, and it wasn't something that the kids are really excited about, if I'm being honest with myself. So I thought that was a really great idea that you brought to our team this year.
Yeah, thank you. It was really fun.
You're welcome. So one of the things that we do during our PLC time with the rest of our team is that we analyze data, and a lot of times it's data from our students in our classroom, but sometimes we look at state testing results. And in Texas, we've seen a decrease in state test scores for 8th grade reading over the last couple of years. What do you think the main factors contributing to this decline are, from your perspective?
I mean, the obvious answer for first of all is COVID. COVID did not help with comprehension and fluency. I would say one of the biggest things that I have seen is that we focus so heavily on the reading aspect of STAR test that when they added in that writing component, a lot of students and teachers were really that kind of tripped a lot of people up, and so they weren't quite sure how to teach the essay writing portion or the short answer response. And so I think between the comprehension and fluency of the reading going down with COVID, and then the way they've redesigned the STAR test, I think that we just they just weren't prepared.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. I feel like as a teacher, we were also learning. We didn't really know what to expect. And I felt like every year since the redesign, I feel like we've been inching closer towards actually understanding what it's supposed to look like. I think the first year, a lot of students on our campus didn't even realize that the essay portion was the essay portion. I'm pretty sure they had to add explicitly this is the essay, right? So I think there was some confusion, and looking at the data for our school, last year's scores were better than the year before, and I do feel really confident that this year will look even better than last year. But I agree that COVID negatively impacted the way students are performing, and I hope that in time we can overcome that gap.
Definitely.
Let's see. And what would you say are some of the biggest challenges, kind of piggybacking on the last question, that you faced with student engagement in your ELA classes? Because I know that that's something that I've struggled with in mine as well. It's how do I get them to care?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is reading. Because anytime comprehension and fluency. Whenever I have a parent ask me, what can I do to help my child at home? The most basic answer is always the one that, I mean, they hate it, but it's also the right answer is they need to be reading.
Right.
Because the only way to strengthen their comprehension and fluency is through reading. And kids just don't really like to read the way they used to. And I'm a huge fan of audiobooks.
Mm-hmm, me too.
However, it doesn't help with kids who, I mean, I'm an avid reader, but I've been reading for 40 years, or not
Right.
40 years, but however many
Something
years.
Something like that.
But I've had all of that time for the fluency and the comprehension portion where I've practiced that, but it's like a muscle, like you have to continually do it. And so when kids are skipping over that part, especially in middle school, like they're not strengthening that muscle. And so getting them to read and enjoy reading, but then also to get them to write and like even just write like grammatically correct sentences, they don't want to do it.
And it's so challenging too, because we're competing with on our campus, all of our students have district issued iPads. So at the end of the day, I feel like we're always competing with the internet, which I mean, it's a losing game, right? Because there's everything on there. There's the kids that like gaming and they have access to games. There's the kids that like watching tutorials on YouTube and they have access to that. There's the girls that want to do their makeup and they're doing that. And so it's just challenging when they have a device with access to anything you could ever imagine with them all the time. How do you compete with that, right? And how do you get them to care about reading or about comprehension or anything like that? I know that one of the things that helped me, I think, or my students enjoy reading, it was a learning curve. In the beginning of the year, I would have them just reading constantly, and they had to have a physical book. There was no iPad.
Right.
And it was a shock to some of them. Like they're not used to stepping away from their device, just letting it go or setting it aside. So there was some pushback at the beginning of the year, but I remember that over time, I feel like they generally looked forward to it because it was a time of pause and disconnect, and they could use their imagination, and it felt really good. And I had some of them give me positive feedback about, hey, I really enjoy this, which was kind of surprising.
Well, and also the fact that we implemented that no phones policy in the classroom this year, I have noticed more engagement than when that had been allowed, because they're not allowed to be on their phones. They're not allowed to be texting or, any of that. And so that has helped decrease the distraction of technology. But I did start trying that the way that you had said that you have your kids read. And a lot of kids who I was really surprised by they liked that time to kind of sit and reflect and actually read. And I loved when you did that. I loved that idea. So I think that that's something that I'll want to do more of next year.
Yes, same. And I actually want to get back into it now that we're, wrapping up testing season.
Yep.
I think I want to incorporate some of that as we close out the year. So let's see. Our next question here is, how have you used technology to boost student engagement and achievement in the classroom? So we were just talking about how difficult it is, right, to get 14-year-olds to care, right? Like it's no small feat. So how can we use technology then to increase engagement and achievement in the classroom?
I mean, there's a lot of really great resources out there, and there are more and more every day. There's this great app that we found for Star, for instance, this year that kind of mimics that. Remember that game, the one where you hold the thing on your head?
Yes.
It's the Charades app.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's that, but you're able to make your own deck of cards. And so we had, put in all the star terms and vocabulary and used that. And so the kids one person would have the iPad and put it on their head, and there would be a term and the other kids had to define it. And the one who was guessing had to be like, oh, plot. That's what we're talking about. And it was to help them, in a way, feel like they were, it was fun for them, and they would get really excited, and it was like a way for them to study without feeling like they were studying.
I remember walking by your classroom when your kids were doing that, and they all looked like they were having the best time. And what I really liked about that, especially because it's ELA and sometimes this part can be challenging, it became a kinesthetic activity, and the kids were moving around, they were moving their bodies, which is not something that we
get to do
very often, right?
Yeah,
like we don't usually get to have like the more fun class. So I really thought that was such a great way to help them, and also just kind of get their wiggles out, get their energy out, get some of that anxiety out of their bodies as they review for the test, because I know our kids deal with a lot of pressure from home, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves.
Well, and it helped a lot with differentiation too.
Yes.
Because, the kids who maybe didn't have the terms down as well were able to learn from peers. But also, it also helped, like, they grouped themselves. There were so many different facets to it, like small group. I was able to go around to each one and I would play around with them. And, it was just a really good interactive way to study.
And that is great. And they think that you're just walking around to play with them. But in essence, you're killing two birds with one stone here. Yeah. You're reviewing, and I think it's wonderful. The other thing, we used a few different programs this year. There's another one that I didn't use a lot, but We Will Write is a collaborative writing platform that apparently lets students, they can contribute anonymously. And I know, like, I know I mentioned anxiety just a few moments ago, but our students, and I think it just comes to that age group, right? Like, they're so embarrassed. They don't want to participate in front of their friends or their peers. It's not cool to be the one raising their hand and being like a teacher's pet. There's so much weird pressure and social dynamics that happen in a room full of teenagers. Right. So the We Will Write collaborative writing platform was really neat because there were short, 2 to 5 minute writing challenges that kids would participate in, and then they'd get feedback based on their strengths. And it was really beneficial, I thought, for students who struggle with writing or feel like failures. It was really a good way to, I think, increase the confidence of all of the students, you know, the ones who are typically the stronger writers, and also the ones who are usually intimidated to write and to share their writing. Right. Well, and anonymity at this age is huge. Huge. Yes. And it's a really important part of, I think, building trust in a classroom too. Definitely. So we can also talk about Factile, which it is a Jeopardy style classroom review that you can design your own Jeopardy board, or you can use some of the ones that are already created. That was really fun, and I know that the kids like to compete with that as well. I mean, they did get a little bit. I mean, I think feral would be the right word, because there was an element of candy involved. Yes. But they were like at the end, like, don't shout out the answer. That's not on your team. Yeah. And they would get so excited to, like, shout out the answer, and I'd have to be like, you guys are on teams. Like, you can't help each other. There are points involved. It was intense. Yeah. They were very engaged. It was intense. And the best part is they are learning. Like, they were excited to learn and to review. Right. And I really loved it. And this is not only, I think, something that could be useful in ELA. I think obviously it can be used in any content area. It can be, for a test, or it can be for something greater like the STAR test or something like that. And I really like it as a way to review, and also to, increase collaboration within a classroom and all of that. So. Well, and having it projected on the screen was fun because they could physically, like, see like Jeopardy, like what had been. Yes. And we got buzzers for next year. I know, which is really, really exciting. Yeah, it'll be a mess. We'll probably need a referee in there for next year. So the last platform that we want to discuss here today is Groovelit. And Groovelit was really helpful this year, I found, because Groovelit it helps them practice writing with different writing prompts or AI-generated prompts. You can create your own prompt, and then there's also the vocabulary practice that you can, have them work on prefixes, suffixes, root words, and you can just use vocabulary from whatever unit you're working on. And they kept adding things throughout the year. Yes, which was fantastic. Kind of fun. Yeah. Yes, and then what I also liked about Groovelit is that it provided instant feedback for the kids. Like, so there was an AI, not grading, but just AI feedback. Yeah, there was an example that it would provide for the kids, and they would receive instant feedback, personalized, detailed feedback on their writing sample, which I thought was fantastic. And one of the things that, I mean, every time I did any Groovelet activity, everyone's keyboard was, I felt like it was
clacking.
on fire.
That was all you could hear.
All I heard. I didn't have to ask anyone to, hey, did you join the Groovelet? Like, everybody was engaged, and that's rare.
Well, the vocabulary one was really fun because you would hear them, like, the first time we did it, they'd be like, wait, what's another word for buried? And I'd be like, don't say it out loud. And they just started being like, oh, that's good. Oh, and like, it really helped with like their synonyms and things like that, which was something that I always struggle with them, where I'm like, well, look up a synonym for that. And
correct.
So that was really good for them to strengthen that.
Honestly, this is really random. I think my favorite Groovelet moment was we were looking at the prefix pseudo, and we were thinking of words that begin with pseudo, and pseudo scorpion was a word. So then I ended up teaching like every class for the rest of the day what a pseudo scorpion is. So if you don't know what it is, you need to look it up. It's a thing, and it lives here in Texas. Yeah. So let's see. Okay, and then the last question for today is, what would you say to teachers who are hesitant about using technology and AI in their teaching practice? And I know we have a few of those in our department. So what would you say?
I mean, I would say, all due respect, get over it, because
so disrespectful.
I say that because it's constantly changing and evolving, and like technology it's here to stay, and it's also, because it's always changing, even people who consider themselves tech savvy are having to learn new things all the time. But it's also a really great way to collaborate with like younger, like have teachers who might be really well at like do really well at the classroom management portion and things like that, but then there's also these like brand new teachers who really could use some help with that, and so they can kind of give each other the help, and it kind of creates a bridge there.
We all have something to offer, right? We all have strengths that we bring to the table, and I think part of being a good educator is knowing where you can grow, right? And technology can definitely feel intimidating, right? Because it is constantly changing, but if you are not able to set ego aside, or even set fear aside, or whatever those thoughts are, and try to learn something new, then this is probably not the right profession. Right. And AI, I know people have a lot of opinions about AI, but it has been really helpful in the classroom this year, as far as just helping provide targeted feedback to kids in the moment. You know, obviously we're not having AI grade their essays or do anything like that. That's obviously falls on the teacher. But when we're talking about giving them feedback on a short writing assignment or on anything, really, it is very powerful to have something that the kids can use to reflect on in that moment.
I think when AI is used correctly, it is great. I think it also really helps it's nice because like they do ask me like, well, can I use this? Can I use that? And teaching them how to be responsible with AI is kind of like our responsibility as well as teachers. And so having that discussion as a department and being consistent, because that's the thing, is that you can't completely disregard it. Like, it's there. It's going to keep getting more and more just like technology. But I think if we can kind of embrace it and say, like, here's what's acceptable for us and here's what maybe we're not willing to allow, and then being able to, like, have that conversation with kids, I think it would help integrate the two things a little bit better.
I agree. Well, Meredith, thank you so much for hanging out and chatting with me. I don't know what I don't know what I would do without you. And I mean that with every single fiber in my being. So thank you so much. Thank y'all for listening. Have a good one.